me yet. Yay, we hear me. I feel better about this. So I'm just going to start my timer just because we're on the ball here. We're here to talk about cracks in the Canadian resource sharing landscape. Today, we're going to quick introductions. I'm going to give a very high level view of what resource sharing is, or ILL, and I'm sure everyone in this room already knows what it is, so I'm going to be preaching to the choir. We're going to have a discussion where we get to talk about stuff, and then we'll have a question and answer period at the end where you get to ask us about stuff, because that's how it works. So we'll start with introductions with our lovely pictures. My name is Alex Fletcher. I am with the Ontario Council of University Libraries, and I'm going to be moderating today's panel.
Hi there. My name is Becky Smith. I am from Memorial University of Newfoundland. I am an ALMA certified administrator and responsible for our Rapido instance. And we're using our LAC symbols here. So I am responsible for NFSM.
Hello, my name is Joe Wickens. I'm from Dalhousie University, where I manage the document delivery services. I'm responsible for NSHD, NSHDL, NSHDM, NSHDS. He's losing time when speaking. At Côté University, as our system, and our LAC code, which is the QMN.
No.
Can you hear me?
No.
Oh, no.
All right, pass that one.
Might be dead.
Okay, we're down to one microphone to make an interesting panel. Hi, my name is Sabina Pagotto. I'm from Scholars Portal, where until recently I ran Racer, our local VBX implementation, and held its hand as it went gently into this good night.
Hello, bonjour. My name is Harjinder Rana. I'm a resource sharing and accessibility librarian at the University of Toronto. I'm also the acting downstream offsite storage and preservation coordinator of the team. And our LAC symbol, which me, as you've heard, the name is OTU.
Hi, I'm CJ Jong, he, him pronouns, head of access services at the University of Alberta. Our LAC symbol is AEU, and we use Relay ILL, Wheelchair ILL, and DocLine.
I didn't mention what systems are selected right now. So right now, the institution has been around since 2021. Also use Rapid ILL, which is the team also use SLC Wheelchair. We've been using that for years.
All right, fantastic. Now we get into what is ILL or resource sharing. And again, I know I'm preaching to the crowd here. I know all of you have heard the terms interlibrary loan, and if you haven't, welcome to the New World Order. So ILL is basically a system that allows libraries to borrow from supply materials to their patrons. Really easy. Now, having said that, discovery of such materials requires a type of interoperability. It's vital to find the stuff so that you know it exists. Then, of course, the owners of that material are put to what we call a RODA, and that RODA is used to send requests to each potential partner. This communication requires another type of interoperability between those systems to communicate these messages back and forth throughout the entire process, updating each side on the status of the request from fulfilled through shipped, delivered, returned. And these messages are typically defined in ISO standards, which, if anyone talks about ISO messaging today, that's what they're talking about. Why is it important though? Like resource sharing, interlibrary loan is all about building relationships with people and institutions, and that can even lead to other shared ventures, not just borrowing a book. The process needs to include item tracking, as I mentioned, so that you know where your stuff is. It's really about collaboration, tightening budgets and shrinking spaces. Sharing the load between different institutions is required now, let's be honest. This leads to the beginning of shared collections because you may have a big budget, but it doesn't mean you can own everything. Now, history of is a really heavy Canadian event. The earliest documented finding of I could find happened in the 8th century. That's 800 and something. Like, that's a long time ago. We've had 1,000+ years to figure this stuff out, and we still haven't. It continued to solidify that until the early 20th century, when IFLA was founded. You might have heard of IFLA vouchers. Apparently, it's an organization that defined how to do ILL back in the early 20th century. Who knew? The National Library of Canada produced this thing called generic script that they began creating around 1987 and published in June 1989 in a newsletter for the first time. In 2002, academic libraries in Canada began adopting ISO-compatible systems like VDX and Relay. In 2008, the Regional Academic Library Consortia across Canada came to a national resource sharing agreement, and today, new technologies are emerging, and the older ones are beginning to disappear. And this is really leading us to what we're here to talk about today. Our landscape is fracturing. So, now we get into the actual panel discussion where you have to stop listening to me and start listening to them. The characteristics of the Canadian resource lands sharing landscape.
I'm so glad you asked, Alex.
It's like we have this prepared.
So, as you may have gotten from that timeline that Alex shared, resource sharing in Canada is very collaborative. We have a really strong history of collaboration and working together, I would say more than most other countries. There are other countries where there's regions that have these really tight level of collaborations, and there's countries where there's a national library and everyone works really well with the national library. But I think Canada is one of the few countries that has these really strong networks between libraries. Partially, that's because we did have really strong leadership from the National Library of Canada. And a lot of it arose from the work of putting together union catalogs back in the day when they were first getting computerized. And that led to us taking more kind of early innovation in technology. So there was the generic script messaging Alex mentioned, which was really the first way that we had like a standard way to send those ILO requests back and forth to each other. That was bilingual English, French, and both human and machine readable, and actually still works today. There are also some challenges to doing interlibrary loan outside Canada. One of the big ones is when you're physically shipping books, having them cross the border can be kind of fraught. Sometimes they get caught up by customs. Sometimes the shipping is really expensive to get to Canada. And in terms of even just requesting copies of digital articles or, a scanned chapter of a book, the Canadian copyright situation is not the same as our neighbors to the south, for example, or other countries. We all have our own laws about things like fair dealing or fair use that can really impact the ability to do those interlibrary loans. Additionally, the National Resource Sharing Agreement that started in 2008 was revised in 2019 to specify no charging between participating universities, which is almost all the universities in Canada. So within Canada, we have this no-cost system, we have fairly inexpensive shipping, and we have a shared understanding of copyright. So that makes it very convenient, very nice to be able to do our resource sharing in Canada.
Oh, thank you, Sabina. So we'll go and we're going to go from east to west. You may not have noticed, but we set up from the east coast to the west coast in a sense that is, this is east, that's west, just like reality. So beginning with your regions and what your Canadian levels of resource sharing look like compared with those elsewhere.
Thank you, Alex. Well, Memorial University is part of the CALL consortium, so the Atlantic Academic Libraries. And we made a decision a couple of years ago to move from using Relay as our primary system for interlibrary loan to using Rapido. And so this has had some effects for us. Even especially within our region. So by using Rapido, we are currently drawing on almost exclusively Canadian partners within that network that we are technically rebuilding in that system. And so whether that is for physical items, that is what's going on. When we look at requests for internationally, whether we are filling requests internationally or we are looking for materials for our own users internationally, Rapido has a subproduct called Rapid ILL built into it, which, considering that there's only 19 Canadian partners, that means that a great majority of that content, which happens to be largely digital copies of articles or book chapters, does come internationally as well. All of this Rapido aspect of it is meaning that about 85% of our physical items are being looked after by other Canadian institutions, but we do also have to use another platform called WorldShare to be able to do those particular requests for physical items to go beyond Canadian borders, and also to try and fill some of the gaps within our Canadian landscape.
Thank you. So I'm going to give a bit of a background on the general environment for resource sharing in the Atlantic region. CAL, the Council of Atlantic Academic Libraries, is the umbrella organization for the region, and under its auspices, Relay was implemented at the beginning of the 2000s. And by 2010, all but one of the then CAL members had adopted the system and were using the system for borrowing and lending. It was a shared implementation, and it required, of course, that there'd be shared policy. So the sort of tightness that Sabina alluded to on the national scale is replicated also in the region, and certainly in CAL in the Atlantic region. Parallel to that, within CAL, the Nova Scotia members had their own consortium that started up before CAL was implemented formally. So the Nova Scotia organization was called NovaNet. And it began with just Nova Scotia institutions, but we've since added Mount Allison University in New Brunswick. So that kind of over the border a little bit. But that's started way back in 1985 and was initially instituted for a shared catalog project, and that went very well. So they had a shared catalog called NovaNet, and soon after that, it was possible to implement a patron requesting through the Primo catalog that we had at the time, and that service was called NovaNet Express, a hugely popular service that allowed us to share even more quickly and efficiently between all the NovaNet libraries in Nova Scotia. Then we migrated to Alma in 2021, which allowed us to continue the NovaNet service and also to implement the P2P service within it that allows us to share resources with other Alma users, like those in Oakland and Memorial. So that's where we stand now. We've got two systems basically that most of us are using in the system. We've lost two. We've lost Memorial, and we've lost Moncton, University of Moncton, as far as Relay users go. So that's where we stand now.
Consists of 18 academic libraries in Quebec, so 15 francophone and 3 anglophone. And in Pagotto, there's two aspects of resource sharing. The first one is the network loan, which was implemented in 2022. It's network home is here to share physical items among academic libraries in Quebec. The service is managed via the WM circulation module, OCLC, and academic libraries share the same circulation policies throughout the whole network. It's very easy for users when they're searching a discovery layer to be able to identify items at the local level, at the public level, at the website level. I think the door to request those items is like changes from one level to the other. Since we've implemented resource sharing in Quebec, like I kind of look at the numbers 5 years ago, 2017-18, we used to share about 18,000 copies among ourselves, and 23-24, we were now at 65,000 copies, 174% increase compared to 5 years ago in terms of sharing physical items among ourselves. But the other aspects of, and also the other thing I want to mention about network home is something that ILO used to cover in terms of borrowing resources, but now it's kind of managed with the circulation module. Before, when the user used to ask for something that we had in our own collections, we used to say, no, please put a hold on it. But now if the item is checked out, let's say at McGill, and it's available at Laval University or Université Montréal, well, it's easy for the user to be able to request, which probably explains why some of those resources get shared a lot more at the moment. The other aspects of resource sharing is ILL. So now ILL is mostly focused on copy requests for among Pivot and also throughout Canada and internationally, and physical items for the rest of Canada and internationally. In terms of lending with our Canadian partners, the numbers are about the same as it was about 5 years ago, but about 5,000, 5,000 copies. But in terms of borrowing, I've noticed since we've implemented the PASA, we're borrowing a lot more copies from our Canadian and international partners. And I think one of the reasons is with the implementation of WMS, it's very easy for users to be able to make a request, like I kind of mentioned, where you're able to see libraries worldwide. But it's also easy for us to be able to borrow stuff from the TAPASA/WorldShare IRL interface if we're not able to find a Canadian partner, easy to build in the US and internationally. But like Sabina mentioned, there's extra costs. The shipping is done via courier instead of Canada Post, and there's custom fees you have to pay, and they're not part of a reciprocal agreement. So there's a lot of extra costs to that. But I think also borrowing from our partner libraries has also gone up just because like the Francophone institutions, a lot of Francophone institutions, the way we develop collections, where we cannot buy everything in English and everything in French. So it's important for us to kind of rely on our community partners, international partners, to be able to complement the collections that we have up to a certain point, and that other libraries in Canada are a bit stronger. Another thing I want to mention is bibliographic matching. A lot of the requests that we're getting from our users, if it's cataloged in English, it's a lot easier to be able to find a partner library in English, which sometimes is bypassing partners that might have the same item, but cataloged on the French record. And smart fulfillment, which part of that is part of a OCLC feature. Well, if I can, maybe it's a bit bold, but sometimes we'll create an uneven distribution of ILL requests where ILL may be forwarded to libraries that have the item available in their holdings, but might not but if everything's checked out in Canada, we end up going a bit elsewhere.
Thank you. Just briefly, so UT had super since relationship because the majority of local libraries have been joined the Collaborative Futures Initiative, and that resulted in which is the shared instance of and UT didn't participate in that. There are a few libraries that participate, but UT has called out anyone else has joined except for different IMC is the so we're all military college and UT are not cooperating, but we're still an ALMA institution, so we can still participate in resource sharing from ALMA to ALMA partnerships. So not to the same extent that the local libraries are enjoying the benefits of the within the network. So if you're in the other local libraries, you have a shared catalog, you can share patron information. Your patrons can go to other institutions to pick up their books, et cetera, et cetera. So U of T users don't enjoy that, and vice versa, but we can still get our materials to other local libraries pretty seamlessly. And I guess you consider U of T to be what we call a net lender, to use interlibrary loan jargon. So that's pretty much means that we send out a lot more of our material to fulfill requests than we're receiving from other institutions. It makes sense because our collection is very vast, so we don't really need too much. So it's about a 2-to-1 ratio. We send out double the amount that we take in terms of fulfilling interlibrary loan requests. But it's flipped when we talk about our international borrowing and lending. So because maybe our researchers want more obscure material, we're going to more international locations to obtain that material. So when it comes to the US and internationally, we're actually a net borrower. So we're taking in more collections than we're loaning out. And just to put some raw numbers on it. So in 2023, 2024, we sent out 14,000 items that were requested. That's books as well as articles and book chapters fulfilled electronically versus 7,000 materials items that we received. So it's quite a substantial partnership or arrangement, and from what I understand, I'm up at arm's length, of course, from what's happening in the Omni instance, but I think the amount of requesting has gone up exponentially. I'm not sure if I'm using that term correctly, but the chart is going this way. It's quite seamless now for users to be able to request. So I think we're very content and happy with what we're seeing with Omni to Alma resource sharing. It's probably by design that it makes it very simple and seamless for users when two libraries are using the same product, but we know that's not necessarily true. Not everyone's on Alma. Maybe one day that'll be the case if COVID has its way. But that's not going to be probably the realistic outcome in all of this. So we're struggling to try to address when we're wanting to learn our collections and borrow collections from libraries who don't use that software, which we'll get into more detail about as the panel goes on.
All right, so all the way in the west, the U of A is part of COPA, which is the Council of Prairie and Pacific University Libraries. It's about 23 full members, and so that's from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. Interestingly enough, in terms of resource sharing leadership, COPA had a resource sharing group. It was dissolved in 2008, and I didn't get to be involved with ILL until 2009. So didn't get to benefit from that, but we established a group in 2019. So during that time, the gap, it was Relay, the company that supported our resource sharing community. So they had Relay user group meetings, and so we went and met our colleagues at those meetings. They also invited people that weren't part of Relay, but were COPA members, so they could join us and continue discussing the issues. So that was great. But then Relay was bought up by OCLC. And so we saw a bit of a change in terms of how that community is organized. So not to say that it's necessarily bad, it's just different. Currently, we're seeing corporate people so we haven't done that yet at the U of A. We're kind of seeing where people are landing and how we can ensure that we keep our connections to all the different networks as long as possible. But we are definitely seeing problems currently with Relay, being able to connect to certain libraries, especially if they don't have wheelchair. So that's been a bit problematic. In terms of our volumes, we generally within Côté, this last year we had over 22,000 requests filled. And that's a significant drop from pre-pandemic times when it was about 36,000. So we're seeing our volumes drop, and perhaps new systems will change that. We're not sure yet, but yeah, it's interesting to see that volume change. At the University of Alberta, we obtain about 45% of our requests from within Côté, about 35% from the rest of Canada, and maybe 20% from the US or international.
Thank you, everyone. So there was a lot of talk about technology in there. I don't know if you noticed it. A lot of talk about how things aren't as inoperable as they used to be. So I put the question to the panel. How has the introduction of new technology created cracks in the Canadian resource sharing landscape? Back to our title. You want me to start? You have a mic. Okay. Keen. Well, again, TPASA is integrated with WMS, with the wheelchair management system, which is linked with the OCLC network. Public libraries holdings are integrated with the OCLC Full Search, which enable users to find authoritative content from worldwide library collections with over 10,000 libraries and over 548 million bibliographic records. These records are searchable via the WorldCat Union Catalog, which is used by partner libraries who are not members of the OCLC network to locate materials for resource sharing. This makes international resource sharing easier and more expensive, but it has also created complications with integration that used to work with our Canadian regional networks when we were using VDX. While TPASA WorldShare is our main system, for our partners, it was always considered a secondary system for international ILO only. Also, not all Canadian libraries have a WorldShare ILO subscription. Since March 2024, we were able to have only, like we implemented TPASA in 2022, only since March 2024, we were able to have ISO 18626 communication with our partners, mostly used by CAL and Côté. However, this is still a work in progress since there are still many little issues that we're still working with OCLC to address, like the conditionals are not appearing. Transmission of copies via article exchange is not automated. Overdue reminders notification requires workaround by public IRL staff. Those requests don't transmit within the system. We're still waiting on OCLC and Exlibris or Clarivate to be able to test integration with Alma, Rapid, and also what's going to be happening with most of the public libraries that are still using VDX. We rely on manual phones to be able to make and receive requests with these partners at the moment. Public libraries in Canada are also planning to replace their VDX with another IRL system, OCLC resource sharing for groups, but this is creating communication issues as it's designed to communicate on public libraries only.
Yeah, so you were talking a little bit about Relay ILL, and the Relay was actually the first partner with Relay International to bring together the product itself. It has grown over the years, and they had initially a desktop client application, which they have been trying to transition to a cloud-based product, which we really wanted. And so we've been working for quite a few years with them, trying to make the cloud-based product work really well. And it does. However, not all of the features are actually in the cloud-based product, so we still have to maintain a desktop client application plus a server to make sure that all the applications run. So that's problematic for us. We want a system that's fully cloud-based, which I don't think is, something we can't expect from our vendors today, right? So yeah, so that's problematic. So I don't think unless they're putting in the resources to make that happen, which I think is very unlikely, Relay is kind of on the way out. We've tried working with that company as well as with our partners to make the ISO standard work just between systems, and we couldn't quite make that work either. So I don't see much of a future for it trying to work with other systems as well. And then the ALMA institutions, if they don't have access to Wilshire ILL, they cannot communicate to our relay system. So what they're doing is they're sending us their requests via email, and we're manually putting that into our system, and then basically sending communications from our system to their email, which, it's just not a great way of doing things. So to me, that's telling me that Relay is on the way out. And so now we're left with options that are basically network-driven products. Either you're going to be part of one or another, unless you're going to have both systems. And that's going to get expensive. Plus, you need staff that are actually able to work in all those different systems. What we really wanted were systems that talk together, able to send requests between each other. So that's what we wanted, and that's how we worked for many, many years in Canada. And we don't know that anymore. Anywhere else?
Yeah, I can build on that a bit. Thanks, CJ. In terms of, about 3 years ago, we were looking at implementing a new system. And when you go out into a great big wide world, I'm here looking at information about Relay and seeing on the vendor website that it is ISO compliant. And only to discover that as we go through the implementation, that claim might be there, but it's not the whole truth. And so we end up moving forward with this implementation because we do want modern features. There are a number of aspects of our Rapido implementation that we were looking for. A better patron experience, for example. Rapido offers some staff saving features so that staff concentrate on the requests that really need attention, as opposed to having to necessarily handle every single request. So we go through this implementation, but find that in testing, it's not communicating. And so what do? Well, in our instance, we have moved forward with it. And the result is we went live with Rapido, and we worked with Rapido, Relay, and WorldShare. So 3 separate systems to try and keep everything going. When we looked at it in terms of materials that our institution needed to borrow to fill the needs of our users, we actually didn't seem to need Relay that much. So in light of those numbers, we did make a decision to say, okay, it's not sustainable to keep these 3 different products going. So as has been mentioned, our Relay subscription has ended as of June. But the thing that I wasn't quite as prepared for was the other institutions looking to borrow from us some of these established networks that were already in place. By doing that, we have not necessarily cut off all of the public libraries and special libraries that may not even have their own system and probably don't have the funding to do such a thing. They're not technically 100% cut off from us, but they've lost all of the ease with which to interact with us. So it's making not only the academic environment, which most of us here are representing, more challenging in terms of staffing and how many systems you're maintaining, but I really feel for the little guys out there that have really been making use of these systems, and those systems aren't getting the support anymore and resulting in choices that are being made.
Yeah, I think a lot of the new ILL systems that are coming out are really great for being able to tap into a network. Like you don't need to add each individual library you might want to borrow from. You just implement it, and then you're part of a network. You can request from all these people in the network. The problem is, as we kind of addressed, there's a lot of really practical reasons why we want to borrow from or lend to the specific libraries we've been working with for, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And that is really difficult. Like you would not believe the amount of copy and pasting that's happening in interlibrary loan departments in 2024 to get, bibliographic information from one system to another, from an email that gets sent into a request form. So it's pretty wild. And some of the technological changes that have been made, like the implementation of the shared Alma instance in Oakland or the WMS in Pibik, mean that it's extremely easier than ever for users to submit an ILL request, which means we're having huge volumes that we haven't seen in a long time. And then we're having this huge volume of stuff that we're having to deal with system in these, awkward workaround ways that are taking tons of staff time, longer turnaround time for the users. And it's really brought to light a lot of problems. I think for a long time, people didn't think about interlibrary loans. So it's just kind of chugging along, still working really well. These systems, this generic script that was invented in 1989 still works really well. And then all of a sudden you introduce new technology and it breaks everything that had previously been working. So it's complicated right now.
Just to kind of add to what Sabina saying, I think consortium and everything even stronger. Like it's so much easier to get material from one material university to another, and between all the customers, like I said, it's so simple. But on the flip side, it's even harder if you're trying to go along with an institution many of these now. So like Becky was saying, I really feel for the libraries who don't have interlibrary systems. If you have WorldShare, if you have it's pretty to get something from the UFT. But if you don't have that system like that, these two systems, we're literally filling out web forms and we're coming to it and to do this workaround. And it's super frustrating and things that we once considered like essential parts of our service. Our vendors are tacking them on as add-ons for the products. We have that Rapido, Collector, Levanto, always go on and on. And it's not just next leaders. I don't want to, I think something some of the benefits. If we could have interoperability, that's really the key, because right now it's more advantageous for us to on customers and just work with Canadian and non customers, and even like just realistically electronic, it doesn't make a difference. But for physical material, to get things across the board, it's expensive, it's unnecessary, it's environmentally irresponsible. So I really hope it's working done on the vendor side. With that said, I just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors of this conference, and we appreciate your support, and we will be able to do this without assistance.
Showing. I just want to offer a different perspective. In a lot of ways, Dalhousie's experience right now is we're living in kind of a golden age. We have decisions made in the past that mean that we have certain features of our relay that allow us to communicate with the WorldShare, and there's really no service that we're shut out of. So we're really happy with the way things are now. And we got Alma, which it's been a really great experience as well. But the thing is that it's not sustainable. It's a very precarious arrangement. And besides that, because of the way that corporate decisions that are being made, things aren't going to stay the same. So this isn't going to last. And certainly administrators are looking at things and they're saying, you've got all of these bits and pieces that we're paying for, and something's got to go. And really, it's hard to make a case to say, yes, we really need all this stuff.
So, just to offer a different experience. Things are going really well. I wish it could go on, but it most definitely will not.
So we have about 9 minutes left, give or take. What are our next steps? And I'm looking at anyone who grabs a microphone first. Everything else was kind of planned up to this point.
Right. Okay. I'd say like this is one of our next steps, basically coming together as a group from across Canada, thinking about the issues, talking through the issues, just learning what each other's experiences are, is really helpful to all of us. And I think we're going to continue this well past this conference and keep our communications going. We don't have any formal organization within Canada that kind of brings us together as ILL professionals. So we just have to kind of make it up as we go. But I think that is one of the greatest next steps. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, this building on that is within your own institutions. We need to advocate for change with our vendors to make sure that they are hearing this need and not just looking at us going, "Oh, you're the Canadians in the room, your customers to your south who don't need such a thing." So, we'll put you on the back burner. This is not what it should be. The international standards need to be advocated for, and we do need to have that as part of negotiations for new systems. It seems.
I'll echo that. In terms of trying to advocate our vendors, we've been working a lot with OCLC in terms of raising a lot of those issues of the importance of sharing among our Canadian partners. And unfortunately, the developments have not been timely. And spending, I feel like those issues that we're having with at the Canadian level is having an impact on the apparency of efficiency or the ease of sharing among our Canadian academic libraries. And I feel also this is a bit of a distraction by spending energy and trying to make ILL or resource sharing work with our Canadian partners. We're not focusing our energy on some of the other issues like they're doing in the US, like controlled digital learning or allowing the sharing of ebooks and working with our publishers. And I also want to add also in terms of working with other libraries, I want to put it out there, Library and Archives Canada, they used to be a huge partner sharing resources until they cease offering ILL. And it would be good to also get them back in the fold.
Yeah, we're also doing a lot of advocacy, but we're also taking some of it back into our own hands. So Opal actually has hired a developer who's working on, working with APIs and working with Ex Libris has something called Cloud Apps that you can kind of develop yourself and sort of add on to Alma to at least make some of this copy and pasting go away, to at least, kind of hack our way into a better workflow with the systems that we currently have. So taking things back into our own hands is also something that we, at least at Local, we are fond of doing.
I want to just give a shout out to this initiative called CrossLink. It's a project that's going to develop in the States. The IDS project, I think, is overseeing information delivery services. That's what it stands for. But it's that's going to allow different systems to interact with one another through this system. It's an open source, freely available, open convention 2025, and it's based on the ISO 18626 standard. So to play nice, but to actually do something independently, not trying to pay lots of limited features on what we're paying for. So I definitely, supporting for kind of drive initiatives to try to increase.
All right, our final question is about 3 minutes to go because I keep getting a glare. What lessons have we learned and can we keep them short?
As someone who is not officially a systems librarian, one of the things that I learned was not to be so naive about vendor claims. So I'm hoping others will take that to heart. But at the same time, if it is a new product that you're working with, you do need to do the due diligence to make sure that things are working. IOL is all about cooperation, and I'm really hoping that the cooperation that we have built, in this process will continue on further, and hope that the vendors will learn from such cooperation as well.
I just wanted to quickly also mention that like a big trend in libraries is the idea of shared print. And if you work in collections, I'm sure you're familiar with shared print and the future of collective collecting. And I think something that gets taken for granted is the role of resource sharing. We just assume that it's going to work and we can try to learn things between libraries. It's not so clear anymore that at the we have a shared print facility in UT. We have 5 different partners. The partners just happen to be on institutions, so it works very great seamlessly, but if we ever want to recruit a partner who wasn't an institution, we're really stuck as to what that would look like. So this is really critical, not just for our niche ILL community. It's going to affect a lot of different things happening in libraries as it relates to collections in Canada and even further than that.
Yeah, I think something else is that in any kind of collaboration, but especially an interlibrary loan, a decision that you're making for your institution or your consortium has an impact on your other partners and other people that you're working with in ways that you might not realize. Like, for example, it's now much easier for local schools to request from some of these smaller NovaNet partners than it ever was before. So they're getting like 500 times the requests from us they ever did, because they used to be requests that would have gone to Quebec, but it's really hard for us to request from Quebec right now. So any decision has these big ripple impacts that you're not necessarily expecting.
All right. So basically, I just want to say that it's so important for us to know that the vendors understand our community that we're working in. So if they're not telling us that they understand it by showing us how, I think we have to ask more questions. We really have to scrutinize, these are the things that we really need within our communities. So is that something that you can provide, and not just take their word for it? So OCLC, they did recently visit us at the U of A, and we were able to show them how we use Relay and what features are really important to us. And, like simple things like copyright stuff. That's important to us, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe we should build that into our system. So it's just recognizing that we do things a little differently, and we do have certain needs. So it's important for the vendors to recognize that. So if they take the time to actually come out and see what you're doing, and that's an important step.
Sorry, Maryvon and Joe, you guys don't have any lessons learned today. So we get to our question period when our wonderful people here are going to steal one of these mics if there's lots of questions. And then when we're done, I see a question over there already. And when we're done, we do have a little surprise for you at the end of this. So get your phones ready. Not too much going on with the surprise, apparently.
I'm Sarah from West 11. I'm the co-chair of the ILO group with Maryvon for the period. I wanted to add voice to what you all have said about the cracks. There it's truly unfortunate that the priorities of the company that developing work tools go against the philosophy of ILL, that is communication and cooperation, regardless of where you come from, where you are working to about your system. So the goal is our goal is to provide access to quality information to help society and research progress, whether in academic or field or in public libraries. We want to give good information to society. So I believe we should affirm this loudly and clearly for Canadian population, and not just for our university. We have a leadership role in scientific documentation, and it's going to be able to communicate easily without creating works around and tools to achieve that goal. So I think that what we did not say to you that we are actually working on reviewing the Canadian agreement for the island. And I think it's an opportunity to make that statement in that agreement, because our directors signed it. So thank you to all the members to bring those information to everyone.
I have a quick question. Why did you have a running panel?
Everyone's there.
Just speak already.
Are there any other questions? Of course, it's at the other room, at the right end of the room.
Here we see the challenges with things that are farther apart.
Exactly.
Where was it? It was back here.
Hi. Thank you for your panel. It was super interesting. And my question kind of relates to what Sarah said, which is, I'm curious what, if any, strategies are going on to bring transparency of these issues beyond just our library world, that is to say directors and above, even politicians. I ask this because I don't know what it's like for every province, but I'm guessing many of you went out to RFP to pick your systems. There are certain standards that are in place to agree to a very large contract, and there are rules set at the governmental level. So making transparency that it is making more work for people who are paid with tax dollars to be able to do things with tax dollars. And at the end of the day, it could be easier if it was just mandated in the contract. I'm curious if anyone is bringing that to light at the people who make those rules.
Also, we have her with us up here.
Well, I will say part of the issue is that like the resource sharing features are sometimes embedded in the actual ILS itself. So it's hard to, if your RFP was for the whole ILS, and then maybe we didn't really make this super clear in the panel, but in OCL, both the Omni instances and UFT, we're not using an additional resource sharing product. We're just using the built-in resource sharing features within Alma. And I think same in Novanet, whereas some other institutions actually purchased the additional Rapido ILL product. So if it's an RFP for just an ILS and then you happen to be using the resource sharing features, it's kind of hard to make that argument because they might tell you to just buy the full ILL product. But most of our funding is coming directly from the libraries themselves and not from like a government grant or something like that. So that also changes the sort of calculus for how you get at some of those requirements. I will say within OCO, we actually made the decision that at this point we were not going to go forward with an additional standalone ILL product because we didn't even get to the RFP stage. We looked at all of the products and we thought none of them had the level of interoperability we needed. We didn't feel comfortable even moving forward with one at this point, which is why we've invested in a developer to help us fix some of those pain point workflows instead. So this is part of our advocacy outreach. I think for a long time, interlibrary loan people have just been talking to each other and we all know what the problems are. So now we're trying to talk to library directors. We're trying to talk to the rest of the library technology community. We're trying to like kind of slowly build outward from there.
And from our instance, in terms of being a Rapido institution, it kind of came about in a different way in that we were able to be an early adopter for it. So it wasn't going out to an RFP. It was trying out a new system and basically doing some early, or depending on your perspective, a late stage testing on the product to try and make it better. And in this environment, unfortunately, Memorial has been going through many years of cutbacks from provincial government, so they're not going to help us out.
I have a question here.
Thanks. I have a two-part question. And I'll just admit I'm one of these people who has just like assumed ILI will go on forever and haven't really given it any thought, probably like many other people who like value, talk about it all the time with students, but have not given thought to its infrastructure. And so on the one hand, I think the landscape that you're describing at the same time as this like AI bombshell of misinformation that we're living, that those two things need to be brought together in this kind of policy advocacy that you were talking about, because public civic access to the kind of material we hold for like through public libraries, et cetera, seems like it's never been more valuable. And I don't know how you fit that into this reopening of the policy statement that you were talking about. So it's sort of a comment, but anything you have to add to that be interesting. And then my second question is like, as we all face budget cuts, and I'm in BC, and we hear all of these things, and I'm also not a collections librarian, but of like big deals being broken up in these massive collections that many of us have had access to over the last couple of decades come to some sort of terminus point. How are you planning for the impacts in ILL given this fractured landscape? So like two big things. How are you going to deal with AI? You're dealing with ILL. How are you going to deal with this AI piece? And then also sort of this time of maybe the end of the big deals and presumably the impacts that'll have on interlibrary loan.
Do we have like another hour to answer that?
This is super interesting. I can speak to the second part of your question a little bit, in that Memorial was actually an institution that I think it was around 2015 that we actually broke up some of our big deals. And I wasn't officially doing resource sharing at that point, or ILL at that point. So I can't quite speak to the numbers. I think it did increase a bit, but it does reinforce the fact that you do need abilities to communicate with other institutions in a relatively seamless fashion. And with these various products that are on the market, it is taking more staff time to do that, because you can't just go, okay, we are an institution that has chosen this product and we can communicate with Pagotto with what they have chosen and go about our business. And that seems to be something that, at least from my perception, isn't necessarily resonating with the vendors in terms of giving institutions that choice. And just assuming that, oh, we need to make them purchase our product. Whereas if various institutions can go, okay, I'm doing this and I know it works with that, then I can stay wherever I am, wherever I'm happy.
In terms of the public libraries and I mean, the public libraries are making their own decisions. We're trying to keep in touch with them as much as possible. And I think the interoperability between whatever systems they pick and whatever systems we pick is something that we do care a lot about. But we can't make decisions for them or, get too involved in their RFP processes. So I think it's something that we really would like to continue. And we would, I think ILL staff are the type of people who will go above and beyond and suffer in silence. And then you come downstairs and you realize that they have these wild workarounds to make something happen that you didn't even know about. So I think people are going to keep on, whatever way they can, providing ILL services, lending things to public libraries, even if we have these ridiculous workarounds where you have to copy and paste things 20 times into 20 different things, just because the people in ILL really care about getting people access to what they've requested. It's all about people and that technology.
And apparently the workarounds.
Thank you very much. That was a really great panel. There was a break now until 3:00, so plenty of time to talk to the panelists.
And there's a surprise. If you've ever met Sabina and I, we know that we actually.
Oh, sorry. This is so taken.
I was going to say, if you've ever met Sabina and I, we like to share playlists at the end of any presentation we do. Today's no different. So there's a QR code with a very Canadian playlist about the places that we help and we serve and we all work in. So, of course. And Jimmy Buffett.
So I'm sorry, there's another talk right now.
And there's another talk. Hope everyone has a good time.